Greetings to all listeners. This is King Echu from Southern Cameroon. I want to give you three different perspectives and compare this perspective on what Southern Cameroon is going through with La République du Cameroon. As we know, Western Sahara has been fighting to gain independence from Morocco. Somaliland and Somalia. Somaliland has been fighting against Somalia to gain her independence, and Somalia is refusing to give Somaliland's independence. And we know of South Sudan that gained her independence from Sudan. And I want to compare this to Southern Cameroon and Cameroon. You see, Western Sahara has a population of about 629,000 people. And Morocco has 36 point something million. So Morocco has a well-defined military. Western Sahara doesn't, with the population that it has. And Western Sahara cannot defeat Morocco militarily. So they cannot force Morocco to give them their independence. And the African Union cannot force Morocco to give Western Sahara's independence, nor can it force Western Sahara to give up the fight for her independence. So the only conclusion is that Western Sahara has to force the hands of Morocco to gain her independence. But with the population that Western Sahara has, they don't have a strong military to fight Morocco, to force Morocco to give them their independence. So for them to gain their independence is almost an impossible, it's a block. I mean, it's a blockage right there. They cannot gain their independence. There's no way for them to fight Morocco because they don't have the manpower. So that's a lost cause. I would say Western Sahara is a lost cause. Western Sahara cannot gain her independence because Western Sahara cannot defeat Morocco in any way. They don't have the manpower. They don't have the population. Now let's also look at Somaliland versus Somalia. With Somaliland and Somalia, Somalia has an internal conflict that's been going on for 20 years. And because they cannot resolve the internal conflict, their focus is on resolving the internal conflict. And because of that, they've been fighting for 20 years. They don't have the energy to fight Somaliland, to force Somaliland to gain her independence. So that has given Somaliland the room to grow and become a self-governing region, a self-governing state. But Somaliland has been fighting through the African Union to gain complete independence. But Somalia is refusing to give Somaliland's independence because they know Somaliland is part of Somalia. And the African Union cannot do anything to change that. The African Union can only respect both parties' decision. They cannot force Somalia or Somaliland to give up the fight for their independence. So in other words, in order for Somalia to gain her independence, Somalia must defeat Somaliland. No, Somaliland must defeat Somalia to gain her independence. But because of the internal issue that Somalia has been going through for the past 20 years, Somalia has put aside the issue of Somaliland for future issues. I mean, issues that they may have to face in the future. So Somaliland cannot gain her independence from Somalia because Somalia has refused to give Somaliland's independence. Both parties must agree. When both parties cannot agree, nothing can be done to change the circumstances. Somaliland cannot change her circumstances because Somalia has not given that opportunity for Somaliland to get her independence. And the African Union cannot change either cause. African Union can only respect it. Now you can look at the issue with South Sudan and Sudan. They went through a civil war that cost so many lives. At the end, Sudan agreed to South Sudan independence, to South Sudan's freedom. So for South Sudan to get her independence, South Sudan had to force Sudan to agree on South Sudan independence. And the only way to do that is to fight South Sudan to cause heavy casualties in Sudan. And in order to cause heavy casualties in Sudan, there must be casualties as well in South Sudan. So at the end, Sudan said that, the casualty is too high. The best thing to do is to let South Sudan to gain her independence. And South Sudan became the newest nation in Africa. So in order for Western Sahara and Somaliland to gain their independence, Western Sahara must force Morocco militarily in order for Western Sahara to gain her independence. Without that, Western Sahara can never gain her independence because Morocco will not give in willy-nilly. And for the same thing with Somalia. The same thing with Somaliland versus Somalia. Somaliland must force Somalia to for Somalia to give Somaliland independence, without which Somaliland cannot gain her independence. In other words, when Somalia internal issue is over, the next issue that they will have to face is the Somalia versus Somaliland, which means that there's going to be a war between Somalia and Somaliland in the future. And if Somaliland, which has a good population, defeat Somalia, then Somaliland can gain her independence from Somalia. This is something that we Southern Cameroonians are going through with La République du Cameroon. You see, what South Sudan went through with Sudan, a war, many people dying, heavy casualties. At the end, Sudan caved in and said, okay, you can have your independence. And then the African Union said, okay, we could see through the process of independence. And South Sudan gained independence. We are going through the same thing. The first mistake that the president of La République du Cameroon, President Paul Biya, made two mistakes. Two huge mistakes. And the first mistake he made was to, declare war against Southern Cameroon. Him declaring war against Southern Cameroon created the issue of us fighting for our independence. We had no other choice but to fight for our independence. And now that we're fighting for our independence, this is the pathway for us to actually achieve liberation, freedom from Southern Cameroon. The second mistake that President Paul Biya made, second big mistake, huge mistake that he made, was to think that he can easily defeat Southern Cameroon in a short period. But guess what? 5 years later, his own soldiers are running out of Southern Cameroon, are running from Cameroon because they don't want to fight the war, because they know going to Southern Cameroon is next to suicide. Two huge mistakes that President Paul Biya did: declaring a war and thinking that he could defeat Southern Cameroon easily. 5 years later, the motivation, the inspiration, the will to fight for an independent Southern Cameroon, to fight for for Ambazonia, a nation of our own, that spirit is high. The people believe it, think it, and act for it. So this is the path for us to actually gain our independence. The path that South Sudan went through is the path that we are going through. So at this point, we all need freedom fighters, soldiers on ground zero, all over the 14 counties, facing all the military of Republic inside Southern Cameroon. Wherever it is, you got checkpoints, you have military bases of Republic inside Southern Cameroon, in any town, villages, cities, you name it, the people of Southern Cameroon must fight, because if they want to become the newest nation in Africa, like South Sudan, the goal, the purpose, the ultimate prize is to defeat the military of La République du Cameroon within Southern Cameroon. And we cannot do that with all these presidents all over in the diaspora. Having 5, 6 presidents or group presidents is not the key to defeating La République du Cameroon. The key is to sponsor, is to support the military on ground zero financially in all 14 counties, in all the towns, in all the villages, that were burned down by the forces of La République du Cameroon. We must support the people there financially, because our independence is near. Our freedom, our liberation, our nationhood is almost there. We can achieve it. We can see it. We can feel it. And all we need to do is to fight. All our so-called diaspora leaders need to do is to sponsor military groups in over the 14 counties. And if we do that boldly, courageously, then Southern Cameroon will be the next new nation in Africa. This is possible. We can achieve it, but we must believe it and we must act for our own interests. This is King H. Till next time.